So I'm ready to remove the inner timing cover now that all the components under the front cover have been removed. And it's secured by a number of Allen bolts, quite a few of them here. And then over here, a very special piece of hardware called Allen nuts. And there's also one of them over here. And then another set of Allen bolts around here. So I just back those off. Now, I find it's helpful sometimes when you have a lot of hardware to make a little piece of cardboard and then put each fastener in a hole at roughly where it came out. That way, if there's different lengths on the hardware, you'll catch that when you put it back together. So I loosened up all the fasteners, and now I'm just going to back them out. And you'll see that the Allen bolts have a flat washer, and that one came out of here, so I'm going to put it in the card right there. Now the Allen nuts have a different sized Allen, so I back that out with a little bit bigger one, and that's what that looks like. Now you can't see it, but back here is another one of those little flat washers buried in here. So I'll put this right there for now and work my way around. So I've got all the hardware out, and as I said, with the Allen nuts, their washers are still in here, but I'll get them when I remove the cover. So just to summarize, Allen bolt, Allen bolt, Allen bolt, Allen bolt, Allen nut, Allen nut, Allen bolt, Allen bolt, Allen bolt, Allen bolt, Allen bolt, Allen nut. So that's how it lays out. Now the quick way to remove the cover is to heat this area. And I use MAP gas, but you can use propane, because right around here is what's called the nose bearing on the crankshaft, and it's captive in a boss in the cover. So to get the cover to come off, if I heat the aluminum cover around here, it'll expand and it should be able to pull it off. Well, let's see if we're lucky. Yeah, it's loose. Yeah. There it comes. Okay, so this is the front crankshaft seal, and that's the inside of the cover, and that's the other side of the seal. A little bit of oil still in here, but the cover's off, and these are all the timing chain components underneath the cover. Now this is that nose bearing that was holding the cover on, so when I heated it, the cover expanded and I could slide it past the bearing. Now these are the three washers that were under the Allen nuts, and I'm just going to use a piece of tape and attach them to my little card, so I have all the hardware in one place. Before I start work to remove the timing chain, I make sure the engine's at top dead center. With the engine at top dead center, this punch mark on the timing gear on the camshaft is going to be at the bottom, or 6 o'clock, or it'll be at the top, 12 o'clock. The reason it can be either is that this turns at half the number of revolutions as the engine. Mine's at the bottom, which is great. Now, the gear teeth on the crankshaft timing gear also has a mark on it, and you can't see it very well, but it's this tooth right here. Now, this is the new crankshaft timing gear, and you can see on this tooth there's a line. So when I put everything back together, that tooth should be pointing straight down at 6 o'clock, and then I'll have the gears installed in the proper orientation. This timing chain is what's called a single row, but on the earlier motors it was a double row. And the nice thing about that is that there is a master link, so it's easy to take the chain off. On the old style double row, you had to have bolt cutters to cut the chain off because there was no master link. Now, this is known as the fish clip, and this is the head, and this is the tail with the little notch in it. And that's the orientation the clip should be on when it gets installed again. So make note of that when you take off the master link. When you put it back together, you want the fish clip in this orientation. So I'm going to use a small blade screwdriver and push on the tail of the fish clip to get it out, and sometimes it'll go flying. Just like that, it took off. Okay, I found the fish clip. That's what I've got now. And there's a cover plate that fits over the master link that I can pull off. Now, the link has to be pushed this way, but it won't come out if it's up against the engine block. So I'm going to have to rotate the engine and get the master link up about here, where I can then push it out behind and get it. So I rotated the engine so the master link is right here, and I'm going to put a magnet behind it just to catch it, and then use a small screwdriver to just push out the link. There we go. And it's on my magnet, so there it is. So I've got the master link out. So I'm going to remove the chain tensioner arm, and it's pushed on by a plunger with a spring behind it, and it's secured up at the top by a snap ring, and I'm going to take a small screwdriver and pry the snap ring off the post. There it is. So that's the little snap ring. Now, as I pull the arm off the post, the little piston and spring are going to want to shoot this way, but they're not going to hurt anything. There we go. So that's what happens, is the spring pops out and the little piston, and there they are. That's the spring and piston. So I've got that arm out of the way now, and it makes it much easier to remove the rest of the timing chain. So I just sort of pull it up and around off of the crankshaft sprocket, and we'll have that out of the way here. Takes a little bit of finagling. There we go. Yeah, a little bit more. Then I can just roll it right off the cam sprocket, get the kinks out of it. There. So there's the timing chain, and the next thing to come off will be this rubbing block. The rubbing block's secured by a bolt and a nut, and I've loosened them up, so I'll just back them off. And underneath that nut is a wave washer, and then the bolt comes out, and it's got a wave washer under the head of the bolt. just like the nut did. And then the bracket comes off, and there's some number here, 14, and a curved surface here. That's what faces you. This is a flat surface, and that's what goes to the back. Now the other two things you might miss is that there are two very thick flat washers that also go underneath the rubbing block. So there we are. We've got all that off. So this tool is from CycleWorks, and I use it to pull off the crankshaft timing sprocket and the nose bearing. And it's got two halves that go together, and a puller assembly, and a bolt that threads into the nose of the crankshaft to protect it from the puller bolt. And I'll show how all that goes together here. Now before I start, I tape with masking tape the taper on the end of the crankshaft because I want to protect it from being scratched. Then I take the little bolt that comes in the kit from CycleWorks and thread it into the threads on the end of the crankshaft nose to protect it from the puller bolt. Now the puller shells have a thick shoulder and a thin shoulder, and the thick shoulder is where the puller assembly goes up against, and the thin shoulder goes up against the back of the sprocket. So I thread this in like this and get it in behind the teeth of the sprocket. There we go. And I find it's a little easier if I just insert the puller to catch this half, and then I slide the second half in. Yeah, a little bit of finagling. There we go. Okay, the two halves are there, and then I tighten up. I hang on to this body with my finger, tighten up the puller bolt to get everything set like that. So I use a pair of 1 1/8 inch box wrenches and just tighten up the puller bolt, and everything should start to come off the shaft. And it'll take a little bit of grunt to make that happen. Now I found it was a little easier if I braced this wrench against the workbench while I continue to work this one. Less effort. And we're almost, I'd say we're there. Okay. So the nose bearing, and then this is the sprocket assembly. So it's all removed. Now you saw how that sprocket popped right off and landed on the nose of the crankshaft with the taper. And you can see where it banged into the tape. So that's proof of why you want to tape that, so that when that happens you don't scratch or nick that machine taper on the end of the crankshaft. So this is the old nose bearing, and it's got some resistance. Here's the new nose bearing. See how easy that spins? So I think the old nose bearing was getting a little tired, so it's good that I'm replacing it.